November 1941. Night settles over London in layers of smoke and damp cold. Searchlights claw at the clouds as anti-aircraft guns wait in silence. Inside the war rooms beneath Whitehall, maps lie pinned and marked in red and blue ink. Thousands of miles away, under a moonlit desert sky, engines idle and metal cools. In North Africa, two armies face each other across sand hardened by months of war. One commander moves fast, striking before his enemy can think. The other waits, absorbing losses, measuring time, and counting ships, factories, and fuel. This war will not be decided by a single charge, but by endurance, and endurance is already being tested. By the summer of 1941, Britain stood in a precarious position. France had fallen. Italy had entered the war on Germany's side. The Mediterranean, once a British-controlled artery, had become a contested, dangerous corridor. Every convoy heading toward Egypt risked air attack, submarine ambush, or surface interception. Yet Egypt could not be lost. The Suez Canal was Britain's shortest route to India, oil from the Middle East, and the industrial lifelines of the empire. In North Africa, the British Army had already fought one campaign. Operation Compass, launched in late 1940, had shattered the Italian 10th Army and captured tens of thousands of prisoners. But victory bred overconfidence. British units were stripped from the desert to fight in Greece, leaving long supply lines thinly defended. The vacuum did not go unnoticed in Berlin. In February 1941, a new formation landed in Tripoli, the Deutsches Afrikakorps. Its mission was limited: stabilize the Italian front, prevent collapse. Its commander, General Erwin Rommel, interpreted that mission aggressively. Within weeks, British positions crumbled under rapid armored thrusts. Tobruk was surrounded. The frontier rolled back toward Egypt. In London, reports arrived daily. Territory lost. Units overextended. Generals requesting reinforcements. For Winston Churchill, the Desert War was no longer a sideshow. It was becoming a test of Britain's survival. Rommel's early successes reshaped the Desert War. He advanced with limited resources, relying on speed, deception, and the hesitations of his opponents. British armor was often scattered, infantry isolated, and command structures slow to react. Yet every mile eastward stretched Rommel's supply line back to Tripoli, then across a Mediterranean increasingly dominated by British naval and air power. In London, Churchill understood this tension. He pressed for action, but also demanded results that could be sustained. North Africa was not simply a battlefield. It was a logistical equation. Tanks meant little without fuel. Victories meant nothing without ports. Every German vehicle destroyed in the desert had to be replaced through a vulnerable chain of ships, railheads, and roads. At the same time, Britain was changing. Factories expanded. Training intensified. New commanders were evaluated, replaced, and replaced again. Intelligence began to play a quiet but decisive role. Signals intercepted in Europe found their way to planners in Cairo. Patterns emerged: supply shortages, unit movements, moments of weakness. Rommel, meanwhile, fought a war of momentum. Each success demanded another advance, another gamble. He pushed toward Egypt in 1942, convinced that a decisive blow could knock Britain out of the Middle East. But the farther he moved, the heavier his dependence became on fuel that rarely arrived on time. Two strategies now faced each other across the desert. One built on speed and audacity, the other on patience and accumulation. Their collision would not come all at once, but in stages, shaped by choices made far from the battlefield. The first angle was leadership. Rommel was a battlefield commander in the purest sense. He lived close to the front, personally directing armor and infantry, exploiting gaps as they appeared. His decisions were immediate and often brilliant, but they were also risky. He assumed success would create its own solutions. In contrast, Churchill never commanded troops in the field. His influence was strategic, political, and industrial. He pushed relentlessly, sometimes recklessly, but his true power lay in sustaining the war long enough for advantages to accumulate. The second angle was intelligence. By 1941, British code breakers were reading large portions of German radio traffic through ultra. This did not provide perfect clarity, but it offered something Rommel never had, a partial view of the enemy's intentions. British commanders could anticipate fuel shortages, plan offensives, and moments when German formations were operating on the edge of collapse. Intelligence did not win battles alone, but it shaped when and where Britain chose to fight. The third angle was logistics. North Africa punished inefficiency. Water, fuel, spare parts, everything had to cross vast distances. British forces, supplied through Alexandria and the Suez Canal, enjoyed shorter routes and greater redundancy. Rommel's supplies had to survive British naval interdiction, air attacks from Malta, and long overland journeys. For every German tank destroyed, replacement took weeks. For every British tank lost, another was already moving east. The fourth angle was learning. Early British defeats were costly, but they were not static. Tactics evolved. Armored doctrine shifted from fragmented assaults to coordinated combined arms operations. Air support improved. Command relationships tightened. Rommel fought an enemy that slowly adapted, while his own freedom of action narrowed. These forces did not clash in a single dramatic moment. They pressed against each other over months, shaping a battlefield where victory will belong not to the fastest, but to the side that can endure pressure without breaking. Another angle was technology, not in isolation, but in integration. British equipment was not always superior on paper. German anti-tank guns were deadly. German crews were experienced. But Britain increasingly learned how to combine armor, infantry, artillery, and air power into a single system. Radio coordination improved. Forward air controllers became more common. Firepower began to arrive at the right place at the right time. From the German perspective, the Desert War grew increasingly frustrating. Rommel's reports to Berlin reflected both confidence and warning. He requested fuel, reinforcements, and air cover. What arrived was often insufficient, delayed, or diverted to other fronts. North Africa was never Germany's main effort. The Eastern Front consumed men and material on a scale the desert could not compete with. Rommel fought brilliantly, but alone, strategically unsupported. There was also a moral angle. British troops endured repeated defeats, retreats, and long periods of uncertainty. Yet morale did not collapse. Units rotated, re-equipped, and returned. The idea that Britain could lose battles but still win the war became embedded in command thinking. For the Germans, victories raised expectations. Each advance increased pressure to achieve the final, decisive breakthrough that never came. Finally, there was patience. Churchill was often impatient by nature. Yet in North Africa, he tolerated setbacks longer than expected. He accepted that the Desert War would be decided not by one daring maneuver, but by cumulative advantage. Rommel could win ground quickly. Britain could afford to lose ground, temporarily. By mid-1942, these angles converged. Two armies faced each other again near a small Egyptian railway halt called El Alamein. Behind the British line lay Alexandria and the Nile Delta. Behind the German line lay hundreds of miles of desert and an increasingly fragile supply chain. July 1942, the desert around El Alamein is flat, hard, and narrow, hemmed in by the Mediterranean to the north and impassable Qatar Depression to the south. There is no room to maneuver. For the first time, Rommel cannot turn a flank. He must break straight through. British defenses are layered and deliberate. Minefields stretch for miles. Infantry dig in. Artillery is registered in advance. The Eighth Army has been rebuilt, restructured, and reinforced. Tanks wait not for a sudden charge, but for a controlled advance supported by guns and aircraft. Rommel attacks despite exhaustion. His forces are short of fuel and spare parts. Air support is inconsistent. Still, German units probe the line, seeking weakness. Fighting becomes grinding and localized. Each ridge, each depression is contested. Losses mount on both sides. Behind the front, decisions matter. British commanders resist the urge to counterattack prematurely. They absorb blows, repair damage, and hold. Supplies continue to arrive through secure ports. Fuel tanks are filled. Ammunition stocks grow. By October, the balance has shifted. The British now possess numerical superiority in tanks, aircraft, and artillery. More importantly, they possess confidence. Plans are detailed. Timetables are rehearsed. Coordination is precise. On the night of October 23, 1942, the desert erupts. Artillery opens fire in a sustained barrage that stretches across the horizon. Infantry advance behind creeping fire. Engineers begin clearing lanes through minefields under fire. The battle unfolds not as a sudden breakthrough, but as a relentless process. Rommel is absent at first, recalled to Germany due to illness. When he returns, the situation has changed. The British are no longer reacting. They are dictating the pace. As the days pass, pressure accumulates. British attacks do not seek spectacle. They seek exhaustion. Each assault forces German units to move, to fire, to burn fuel they cannot replace. Every tank disabled becomes a permanent loss. Recovery vehicles sit idle for lack of petrol. Ammunition is rationed. Radio messages grow urgent. Rommel recognizes the danger. He orders counterattacks to restore the line, committing his remaining armor reserves. These thrusts are met by concentrated artillery fire and coordinated airstrikes. German formations punch forward, then stall. Crews fight with discipline and skill, but momentum no longer exists. The desert that once enabled rapid movement now traps them in place. By early November, the attrition becomes irreversible. British armor breaks through selected sectors, not racing ahead, but widening the gap methodically. Rommel requests permission to withdraw. The response from Berlin is delayed and contradictory. Hold. Counterattack. Do not retreat. When authorization finally arrives, it comes too late. The Afrika Korps begins a fighting withdrawal westward, abandoning heavy equipment to save men. British forces advance, cautious but persistent, unwilling to repeat earlier mistakes. The pursuit is steady, not reckless. Alamein does not end the war in North Africa in a single blow, but it ends something more important. It ends the illusion that speed and daring alone can overcome material imbalance. For the first time, a German field army is forced into sustained retreat by British forces. In London, Churchill delivers a measured assessment. Not triumph, not final victory. Something quieter, but decisive. The Desert War has turned. The immediate results are unmistakable. Axis forces retreat across Libya, abandoning positions once taken at great cost. Ports fall back into Allied hands. Supply lines reverse direction. British and Commonwealth troops, long accustomed to withdrawal, now move forward with caution and discipline. Casualty reports reflect the nature of the battle. Losses are heavy on both sides, but irreplaceable on one. German and Italian units suffer from equipment shortages that cannot be remedied. Tanks, guns, and vehicles left behind are stripped or destroyed. Morale shifts. British confidence rises, grounded not in sudden success, but in proof that their system works. Churchill addresses Parliament, emphasizing restraint. He does not claim final victory. Instead, he frames El Alamein as a turning point, a place where the enemy was stopped, not annihilated. The war continues, but under new conditions. For Rommel, the aftermath is personal and professional. He conducts an orderly withdrawal, preserving what remains of his force. His reputation for skill remains intact, but the strategic reality is undeniable. The initiative has passed. Reports from the front describe exhaustion, dust, damaged machinery, and men push the limits that no longer promise reward. The Desert War has changed character. It is no longer about seizing opportunity, but about surviving pressure. El Alamein alters more than a front line. It changes doctrine, confidence, and expectation. British commanders apply the lessons learned in the desert to future operations. Detailed planning, overwhelming firepower, and strict logistical control. The idea of waiting, preparing, and striking at a chosen moment becomes central to Allied strategy. Strategically, the victory coincides with other pressures on the Axis. American forces land in North Africa in November 1942, opening a second front in the region. Axis troops now face converging armies, further straining already fragile supply networks. What began as a defensive commitment becomes an unwinnable theater. For Germany, North Africa fades in importance. Resources are pulled east and west, leaving Rommel's forces to fight with diminishing support. The myth of the unstoppable German advance suffers its first sustained challenge by British arms alone. It is not a dramatic collapse, but a steady reversal. For Britain, the psychological impact is profound. Alamein becomes a reference point, proof that adaptation and endurance can overcome early defeat. It reinforces faith in leadership, in industrial capacity, and in coalition warfare. The empire is no longer merely surviving. It is shaping events. The desert, once a symbol of vulnerability, becomes a training ground for modern warfare. Combined arms, logistics, and patience replace improvisation and desperation. This was not a victory born of speed or daring alone. It was a victory shaped by restraint, learning, and the acceptance that modern war is a test of systems as much as individuals. Rommel fought with skill and courage, but brilliance cannot manufacture fuel, ships, or factories. Churchill never faced an enemy across open ground, yet his decisions shaped the conditions under which victory became possible. Alamein reminds us that leadership is not always about action. Sometimes it is about endurance, holding long enough for strength to accumulate, for mistakes to be corrected, and for time to become an ally. In war, the moment that decides everything often arrives quietly, after patience has already done its work.